আপনারা দেখছেন টকিং পয়েন্ট, সৌজন্যে স্যাপ সলিসিটরস, যে কোনো আইনি পরামর্শের জন্য।
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking to our distinguished guest today, Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, about various other things amongst that were Islamophobia, extremism and all that. But we'll change the topic and we will move on to the business atmosphere, the low interest rate in the country, and how to invest and where to invest. But we'll talk about Lord Ahmed's various foreign visits to Bangladesh, to Palestine, Israel and other places. Lord Ahmed, what is the situation right now for investors with the interest rates so low? You were mentioning that the investors have to be educated to invest in bonds. See, what we have seen over the years, and so have you, that the investment in brick and mortar is more profitable over the years rather than the bonds, the papers, or hedge funds, and there have been quite a number of problems with that kind of investment.
Well, investment is always important. What do investors, banks tell you always? You know, every investment has a risk attached with it. Right. And just as an aside, if I may, and perhaps we'll come on to talk about that, but the government has, for example, been quite susceptible and open to developing Sharia-compliant products. Islamic banking is talked about a great deal. You know, the government has set up accounts and the ability, working with the banking sector, to make available loans in a way which are reflective of Islamic principles. Indeed, we've launched a government bond as well, where you talked about government bonds, which are government securities, which are the first one for, you know, in an Islamic format. So there's a lot of steps we've taken. But coming to your direct question on interest, well, first of all, the economy is doing really well.
Yep.
You know, if we have got low interest rates, we've got low inflation, we've got high employment, low unemployment, and we're one of the fastest growing economies now in the Western world, with growth beyond what was expected.
I'll allow you to do that considering the elections.
Well, the election's coming, but I think it's fact. I'm not saying anything to you. I hope you'll agree. But your point on interest rates and low interest rates, who benefits least are, of course, those people who are basic savers.
Yeah.
And I think we were talking earlier before coming on there about some of the opportunities. And I think when you take a step back, there is great time being invested on financial literacy. But that financial literacy focus is on the new up-and-coming generation, to educate them on the importance of, number one, their own finances, and then how to invest, how to save. But I think there is a generation, which is a lot of the people who are of perhaps a generation that did rely on their basic bank account, savings account with the banks, and now see a very marginal return on that. And I think it's an important role for the industry, the financial service industry, to open that up a bit and say, how can we actually allow people to become more knowledgeable about the different types of products, which are still very much risk averse. So we could talk about portfolios in terms of those which are made up of basic cash, basic bonds, which are maybe government bonds, i.e. investing in your government, if I could put it that way. Corporate bonds, which are bonds or investments in those companies which are more established, more profitable, a safer form of investment, and then perhaps something which is more broader. Now, and you're allowed to bring that together as a portfolio, and there are many people who make those kind of investments. The important thing is, do we communicate it as a society, but particularly I look towards the financial services industry, in a way which allows people who perhaps haven't had that experience.
But this that you're talking about is about big investors, isn't it?
It's not big investors, even the small investor. You know, if you've got certain levels, the first thing I would say, if you were asking me, Tariq, you know, which way should people go? Go and meet with your bank and go and meet with your financial advisors. And they'll be keen to hear from you. I think it's important. Sometimes people think, I don't know what to do. There's an apprehension. Some people feel, if I'm embarrassed to almost ask the question, don't be. Go out there, talk about what you currently want, what kind of investment you want to make, what kind of return you want to see on your investment, and what kind of risk appetite you have. And I think once you establish what that basis is, you'll actually find there is help out there. But I also think that the financial services industry can do a bit more on perhaps opening up and making that available and more palatable and understandable to the people who they're seeking to, the savers, if you like. It's that step over, isn't it, from being known as a saver to becoming an investor. And sometimes that's a step which people don't take because they don't know enough, or perhaps they fear that it's going to be too risky for them.
Well, you have used a very interesting term, risk appetite. See, not everybody can really take that kind of risk, thinking that if he's investing £100,000, you see, and after 5 years it does not give him the kind of return that he is wishing, so he might choose again, as I always say, he will buy a house or buy a flat or something, or probably he will have to get money from somewhere else too, like a mortgage, and with interest rates so low, he'll be laughing.
Well, it's a good time to buy property. I mean, property, you've mentioned bricks and mortar. We're sitting here in studios in London, even in the studios where many years ago I was talking with my press officer and my private secretary as we were coming over in the car, and we were talking about my first investment that I made, my first flat that I bought. Why? Because there was a culture on saying, you know, my father, Daddy saying to me, Tariq beta, you know, invest, as soon as you start working, invest in a house, which I did. I listened to my dad. Rather than buy fast cars and this, that and the other, I invested. And why? Because number one, I had the right advice, but secondly, access to the market. And I think it's important, and the government has taken many initiatives to allow people of this generation to take that first step onto the property market, to lower, make housing available, because there's an acute shortage of housing, but make that accessible in terms of finance, make it accessible in terms of deposits, so lower the deposits, make it accessible in terms of the ability to rent before you buy, easing the burden, if you like, to allow people to step on to the property market. And you're quite right, bricks and mortar investment in Britain, particularly here when we're sitting in London and the southeast, you can't really go wrong because it has demonstrably shown a return in terms of your capital investment. I think the important thing is that we create the conditions to allow people to invest in that way, but also allow the access, both in terms of housing, but also to finance. And I think we've got to work very closely with the financial sector, which the government is, with the banking sector, to actually make those first-time mortgages available to first-time buyers.
Right. What is the solution, as we were talking about, and you suggested that it's a supply and demand situation, because if we have more houses available, the prices will probably go down.
Well, I don't think they'll go down. I think capital, you and I can reflect back on history. I think incrementally and I'm not going to make this into a great discussion about economics or whatever, the inflation rate is important vis-a-vis house prices. But I think the important thing on housing is there is a shortage of housing. I accept that. That's why the government has invested a great deal. We had a target of delivering both affordable homes as well as homes generally, and we're looking to achieve that. We would have delivered, close to about 170,000 affordable homes by the time at the end of this year. We've already delivered 140,000 of them, and those are making homes affordable for those who perhaps couldn't access the housing market. But along with that, I think it is important to undertake house building. We've seen, for example, only last week in Parliament, my colleague, the Housing Minister, and I announced in respective houses that we're moving forward on the development in Ebbsfleet, in how to move forward and create a new garden city. There's a raft of different initiatives which are aimed at house building, and we've given a commitment. Again, the Prime Minister last week did about providing an extra 200,000 houses over up to 2017. So I think all of these are targets. One could say, oh, these are aspiration, and government minister talking to targets. But actually, if you look at it, as I quoted earlier, we've got houses actually being built and delivered. And it's important that we actually target that quite specifically, and we're working very closely with the construction industry to make it happen.
Well, I'm sure that you are aware, some of the estate agents I met, they tell me that a number of houses, particularly in posh areas, they remain vacant throughout the year. Maybe the owners come from overseas for a couple of weeks and then they go away. So how can we get around that problem?
Well, we're actually have an initiative again in government to actually tackle this whole crisis around empty homes, and we have been working with local authorities to actually get these empty homes released. Indeed, for example, one of the penalties that if a home is empty, and you talked about these foreign investors, we've looked at how council tax, there's a penalty around council tax payment, and also we've been changing some of the laws around capital gains, so those who come from abroad and actually use this just as a basis to have a home and then make a capital gain on them and then sell it, there's a greater role for capital gains tax, and we've reviewed the laws and the application of those to ensure that happens. Is more needs to be done? Yes, but you've got to sort of balance this out between having an open market in terms of the ability to people to buy. We want to encourage investment across all sectors in Britain against the need, as you rightly said, about tackling the housing shortage, and tackling empty homes is an important part of that.
Well, as an expert financier, and
you're being very generous here.
And with a lot of knowledge of business in the city, how would you advise somebody who wants to invest some money, where to invest, and what risks to avoid?
I'm also a government minister, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to start giving you investment advice at this juncture. As I said earlier, the important thing is there are financial experts out. Of course, I have a financial background, and I can talk in general terms, but it is important that if you need advice, go and see your local bank manager, go and see a financial advisor, but everyone has a bank account. You know, the best advice I can offer is tomorrow morning, go to your bank, say, this is what I have, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to receive. How can the bank help? And I think they'll find some very good advice there.
Right. And in your opinion, the environment is conducive to make investments?
Well, I think the environment is a healthy environment, as I said today, and then you'll say to me that I'm now talking about government and how well we've done. But genuinely speaking, even if I was being objective, and I hope your viewers feel that, certainly the viewers here in the UK, that the economy has turned around. You know, we were accused that this would mean greater recession and this, that and the other. Well, the economy is growing, you know, investments up, construction's up, more homes are being built. You know, employment, over 30 million people now are employed in the UK in different jobs up and down the country. That's a record high. You know, unemployment, even the governor of the Bank of England has to revise his forecast because unemployment has fallen. Apprenticeships, we've created over 500,000 apprentices. Not everyone wants to go to university.
Lord Ahmed, we have come to the end
have we? Well,
of our interview.
Doesn't time fly? But
yes, it does, it does, it does, particularly when I have a very good speaker.
Well, I have a very good host. My pleasure.
Thank you being with us and making time for us. It was a pleasure and an honor.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being with us, viewers, and we hope that with all this advice on finance and investment, you will have a profitable week. We'll see you again, same time, same channel next week. In the meantime, take care.